Hello everybody. So in this video I want to take just a short time, this will be a relatively short video, and talk about professional development. This is just a very cursory look at professional development. This follows, of course, still in Standard 2, and as part of the standard, you can see the language there providing an effective educational program, applying best practices to student learning, and designing comprehensive professional growth plans for staff. So it's natural that professional development would follow a presentation on curriculum and learning. As we have stated already, curriculum is really the framework around what we're doing at the school. That is guiding what we're doing at the school. And then on that, we're going to look at student learning. Are students learning the curriculum that we have established? If we determine we have an effective curriculum in place, and then we look at the next step and look at student learning and find that there are gaps in student learning, then what we need to do is move into the next area, and that's professional development, to get our teachers to the point where they can work, teach, and all students can learn. So that's the goal of this, is just to look at some basic ideas on professional development. So with that, let us look here at the mission of principles related to professional development. Okay, and here I like to make a distinction when I'm working with schools between mandated training and professional development, because most of what we tend to see is what I would categorize as mandated training. These are things that the state is requiring, such as bloodborne pathogens, or the federal government's requiring, such as FERPA. All these things count toward your 15 hours of annual PD that is required by law in Oklahoma. And we typically bill those like lawyer hours. So if you have 30 minutes of PD for bloodborne pathogens, that counts as one of your hours. What gets cheated in this, concentrating on those mandated hours, and typically we see those piled in at the beginning of the year, is that ongoing professional development, the real professional development. And so as a principal, these are the things that you need to be aware of as you're going on. Okay, well read and educated in the latest research, and we've talked about that a little bit already. And in your professional development project, you're going to have to use a little bit of research to create your professional development project. The ideal PD principal defines their own personal professional growth needs according to data. What do you want to see change in the data, and how do you need to change yourself to make those changes come about? Thinks forward and consequentially. What's going to be the state of your system in 2 years or in 5 years? What are the changes that are coming that your teachers need to be made aware of? One of the things I always tell people is that change is constant. And if we don't guide change, then change is going to pull us along, and we find ourselves always being in a reactionary mode as to change, and we're constantly putting out fires instead of building up walls to prevent those fires from happening in the first place. So think forward and consequentially. What is going to be required of you and your teachers in 5 years, 10 years, etc. Solution focused, analyzes impact on campus, sensitive to the students and the community, initiates and implements collaboratively driven professional development plan, and finally, scan needs of teachers, monitors instructions, and disaggregates data. That's very important that we see that, because this gets to that very first presentation where we talked about all students learning. And it's really here where we start to be able to work with individual teachers on individualizing professional development and creating professional development plans for individual teachers. It's when we are in classrooms as principals, monitoring instruction and disaggregating and looking at individual data. If we find that our teachers are unable to do that and address those needs, then that gives us a clear sign of where we need to work with those teachers and get them all on the same page. From there, that has to be a minimum, and from that we can then plan collaboratively how we're going to move as a system. But individually, we all have to be at that starting point where we can look at individual students. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're working toward creating individual plans for your teachers. The principal's mission then: work with teachers to develop a comprehensive professional development targeted at individual needs and also collective needs. Okay, so think of what that would look like if you said, I want to have a system where our teachers all work together to determine what kind of PD we need as a group, and subsequently they look at what PD they need individually. Okay, you as the principal would provide resources, that is making time in the schedule and finding the necessary funds for it, for teachers to be reflective about their practices, because that's really what's going to happen when you have a strong professional development. Is that's going to encourage teachers to be real reflective about their practices. So the question then, what is the advantage of this approach to teachers PD? It really becomes targeted at that point to the individual needs of your teachers. And think of what this will add to the culture of your school, where individual teachers feel that the culture is one of achievement for all, and they become a part of that all. It's not just all students, it's all stakeholders in the system. And then the climate in the school, how the teachers feel about you as a leader in the school, is going to grow tremendously. Okay. So high quality PD, here's something that you need to take into consideration when thinking about professional development. Knowles is a researcher used in one of the textbooks that we used to use for this course. But here are some things that you need to know about adults, because when we're working with adults, it's different than working with students. We call working with adults and adult learning andragogy. And so here are 3 things that you need to know about working with adults. Number 1, adult learners need to be self-directed. We try to get that in students, but adult learners, we want them to be self-directed. Number 2, adult learners display readiness to learn why they have a perceived need. It should probably say when they have a perceived need. Here is when we, by looking at data and identifying students who are not achieving adequately, by showing this to teachers, teachers can try, and once they get to a point where they realize, I don't know how to work with this student, then we can start seeing this need for individualized PD. And then finally, adult learners desire immediate application of new skills and knowledge. And this is a good thing, as we'll see. The last 2 slides here talk about what quality PD looks like. And one of those is the ability to apply it, monitor, and evaluate it. And so adults, teachers, need to be able to apply the new skills that they're using, have that monitored and evaluated, and determine if it's being successful or not. So when you think about these findings, the implications of these findings on your PD program show that really what's going to happen is your focus is going to shift from those mandated trainings that we count as quote-unquote professional development at the beginning of the year to really effective professional development, improving teacher design and delivery of what happens in their classroom. Okay, so let's finish with a couple of slides here. We're going to look at 10 effective principles of professional development and go through them real quickly. Number 1, effective PD focuses on teachers as central to student learning, yet includes other members of the school community. In your project that you're looking at, we want to see professional development opportunities offered for everybody. Obviously, we're going to concentrate on teachers because teachers are central to that student learning, taking that curriculum framework and transferring it into student knowledge through teaching. Okay, that's central. And so we have to focus on that, but we can't exclude other members of the school. Okay. Number 2, effective PD focuses on the individual, collegial, and organizational improvement. Okay, different levels of PD here, and we see this in other places. We talked about the system, the unit, the teacher. Same thing here. Okay, we want PD at different levels. We really can. My vision would be to get to that point where we're concentrating on an individual level that has an overarching unit to it, and ultimately the system. But our concentration is really building up individual teachers to their max. And once we get those individual teachers to certain levels, we can then start working with professional development as a unit, as a school, and then as a system. Okay, but just like students, we know the students come into, say, the 8th grade. Some of them are performing at a 9th or 10th grade level, and some of them are performing lower at a 7th or 6th grade level. It's the same with teachers. Teachers who are entering their 4th year, some of them are rock stars and are doing it like pros who've been doing it for 10 years. And some of them are still struggling and teaching, displaying ideas or qualities that you would expect to see in a first-year teacher. Okay, so just as we want to treat students equitably and meet them where they are with individualized instruction, here this standard, this effective principle is saying we need to do the same with teachers where they are in their teaching careers. Effective PD respects and nurtures the intellectual and leadership capacity of teachers, principals, and others in the community. Obviously, we want to honor where they are and target those deficiencies. And by using the data that we talked about earlier and getting them as adults to realize where they are deficient, we can do that. And so think of this as you as principal and what it means for you as a principal then to be cognizant of so many things that you can work with your teachers on this. Effective PD reflects best available research and practice in teaching, learning, and leadership. That is why your PD project will require you to do some research. Effective PD enables teachers to develop further expertise in subject content, teaching strategy, uses of technologies, and other essential elements in teaching to high standards. What are some specific areas where teachers are struggling to meet the needs of students? Okay, some of them it may be simple as subject content. That comes with experience. When I first started, I didn't know hardly much about history compared to what I thought I knew. I really didn't know as much as I thought I knew, is a better way to say that. By the time I got to about my 5th year, I knew so much more about history. So subject content is going to come with experience, but teaching strategies is something that you may find that you're giving to veteran teachers as well as new teachers, especially when it comes to using technology in your teaching strategies. Technology is always changing, and so whether it's a 20-year veteran or a second-year teacher, teaching strategies and uses of technologies can apply to both of them equally. The last set here, number 6, effective PD promotes continuous inquiry and improvement embedded in the daily life of school. Constantly questioning, getting into that idea of continuous improvement. Okay, teachers asking, is this working? How can I do this better? How can I reach these other students in a better way? That kind of thing. Okay, always reflecting upon your lessons and what you're doing. Effective PD is planned collaboratively by those who will participate in and facilitate that development. Again, you need to work with those individuals who are behind the curve a little bit, but certainly work in a collaborative manner with your whole faculty and staff. And as you move forward as a group, you can enhance those individuals along the way. Effective PD requires substantial time and other resources. This is where you're going to have to come in and do things like work with the schedule. Ultimately, maybe you're looking at early release days, once a month, once a week, however you want to do that. A lot of this can ultimately take place in professional learning communities, PLCs, though they are not designed for professional development. If they start out that way, you can build up the capacity of your teachers and then ultimately get to the main point of what a PLC is. And that's work with student data and identify student needs and build upon the strategies that teachers are using. So you can see how once you get a PLC in place and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, then it becomes a professional development opportunity in itself. Number 9, effective PD is driven by a coherent long-term plan. As part of your project, you're going to include your professional development calendar. We want to see what the plan is for your current year. Ultimately, when we look at school improvement plans and in the bigger picture district plans and specifically strategic plans, what kind of professional development is going to be required to get teachers to where they need to be at the end of that 3 or 5 year strategic planning period. And then the last thing here, effective PD is evaluated ultimately on the basis of its impact on teacher effectiveness and student learning. This assessment guides subsequent professional development efforts. The last thing on your checklist that you're going to do is determine how your professional development is monitored and evaluated. If we spend money on a professional development activity, let's say we want to increase the use of technology in the classroom, then we have to have ways to monitor that, spelled out in the professional development activity, how it's going to be monitored, and ultimately ways to measure the impact of that professional development. Is it really happening and working? Okay. And so be thinking of what it's going to look like in the terms of being monitored, and then ultimately what data can we use to see if that professional development has had an impact. That's going to help guide subsequent professional development efforts, because maybe we need more intense training, maybe we need to take the training to the next level, or maybe we realize that we're just not ready for that, or it's not appropriate after all for our teachers and our students. Anyway, all that comes through monitoring and evaluation. So that's a quick look at the importance of professional development and some large ideas to take as you go into this.